Hi everyone, we're on to the next lesson and I am feeling much better compared to last week. This week's reading was Exodus 25 through 50, which was quite a lot, but it was good. And next week's is Exodus 1 through 18, and I'm looking forward to that. So this week was all about the famous story of Joseph. And many people know this story, and it's quite a good one. So starting off, reading through, you see all the sons of Jacob, and he had 12. Now some of the names are kind of hard to pronounce, so I'm giving my best shot, but going in order, this is who they are. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, now this one's hard, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. And Jacob loved his sons well, and they all had, they had different mothers, 4 different moms. And the first 4 were of Leah. The next 2 were of the handmaid of Rachel, whose name was like Bilhah. And then 7 and 8 were the handmaid of Leah, which her name was like Zilpah? And it's hard. And then Leah had 2 more after that. And then the last 2 were Rachel's. And Rachel was the wife Jacob loved the most. She was the one that he had worked for, I think it was 14 years. Maybe it was less or more than that. But he had worked a long time to have her as his wife. And he was tricked to marry Leah first. But he did love all of his children and his wives. Moving on to the next topic, we're looking about the envy of the brothers towards Joseph. Now, in the scriptures, it does say that Joseph was the more beloved son of Jacob. And some of the thoughts behind this were that he was the first son from Rachel, his most beloved wife. And she had been barren for a very long time, and so it was exciting for him to finally have a firstborn son of his, I believe he counted it his first wife. Jacob presented Joseph with a coat of many colors. Now, in today's thinking, people believe that this means a multicolored coat that had like reds, blues, greens, purples, all the colors they could think of. But with further understanding, the Hebrew definition means a coat that had long robes and sleeves. Now this doesn't deter from the greatness of this gift. These kind of coats were worn by royalty or upperclassmen who were higher up in society. And to give only one son such a gift is kind of frustrating to the other sons. Also when Joseph started having dreams where it was representation of his brothers bowing down to them, this didn't help the situation of their envy. They then began to hate him because he was saying such things of them serving him. Now, according to how things worked back then, the first son would receive the blessings of the father. Now, there were quite a number of sons before Joseph, specifically 9. And there were many of them that thought that they deserved the blessing more than Joseph. Now, so Reuben, obviously, he's the firstborn of all the sons. So automatically he thinks, I deserve the blessings. But then Dan was born from the handmaid of Rachel. And technically the handmaid was property of Rachel. So therefore, technically the firstborn of Rachel in a way. And so he thought he deserved it, and many of the other brothers had their own reasons. Now, their envy was eventually led up to action, and therefore getting Joseph in the situation he later is in. And we'll go into that with the next part. Next, looking at the challenges Joseph faced in chapter 37, how he probably felt during those challenges, and how it applies to young adults nowadays. Now, first, Joseph was hated by his own brothers, which is quite sad to think about, that your own siblings wanted you dead. They had made plans to kill Joseph, but luckily Reuben convinced them just to throw him into a pit for a couple days. Now, that's not entirely better, but he wasn't dead. And from there, his brothers disliked him for being good. Joseph never did anything bad. He never had any thoughts of spiting his brothers. He did what his father asked, and he followed the commandments of God, and his brothers thought he was just too good. And while Joseph was in the pit, he was picked up by slave keepers, I'm not sure what to call them, and he was sold into slavery, and he was taken a far ways away from his home, all the way to Egypt. And to be put in a new situation like that would be quite scary. I can imagine Joseph was frustrated and frightened of what was going to happen to him. He was far away from his family and home, and he was in a place that he'd never seen before, and he was degraded. He was mocked, he was made a slave. He worked, but being a slave was nothing like working in the fields. And I would never want to have that happen to me. And comparing that to what happens to today's youth is kind of weird to think about. I was kind of thrown off by this question, and so it took me a while to think about it. So in today's society, it's bad to be overly good. You're known as a goody two-shoes, a kiss up. You're not supposed to be good, and oftentimes in a way you're thrown into a pit. You're outcasted. People don't want to associate with you, and they shun you. And Joseph was shunned by his brothers. So that's how I compare one way. Sometimes the youth and everyone are thrown into situations where you're not prepared. You have no idea what's going on. And that would be very scary. So that's much like Joseph being brought into Egypt. He had no control over it, but he had to do it because otherwise they would have killed him. And sometimes in school or with children or teenagers their own age, they are thrown into situations where it's confusing and it's hard. And hopefully you can try and handle it like Joseph and stay true to the commandments of God. And this is kind of hard for me, and I'm kind of throwing myself into this kind of situation, and I'm taking the opportunity to teach others about the gospel. And Joseph took the opportunity to live the standards of God.